Great. All right. So this is a new text. So every time we have a new text, I always do my little survey, right, to see how you guys handled it. So let's see. Remember, 10 is like it was an amazing experience, best thing ever happened to you. And 1 is like horrible, horrible moment in your life. Okay, need tens for Rumi. Raise your hand. Okay, 9. Okay, Islam. 8. 7.
Wait, I'm sorry. What did you ask? I said I thought you asked like if you liked Ruby.
Whoever is speaking, please raise your hand next time. It's Islam. Okay. Shepherd. Okay. Yeah, it confuses me when voices jump out at me. Where was I? 7, 6. Okay, 5, 4. Now we enter the hater territory. Okay, ho. 3, 2. Oh, sing. 1. Amazon also. Okay, let's start with the haters. Amazon, sing, ho, what happened? Tell us.
I was raising my hand for 5, but
Okay,
so I'm neutral. I'm not a hater.
neutral, all right. So who was that just spoke? Oh, okay. Yes, Amazon, sing, what happened? What went wrong? Oh, you're neutral too? Okay, everybody's kind of like Amazon, you're the only one left. You're the only hater left. Tell us.
I meant to put 4 actually.
Okay, 4 is still hater. Tell us what happened.
4 is still hating.
Yes.
I mean, I liked that. Wasn't too bad. I actually
4 out
liked
of
the
10. 4 out of 10, you liked it?
yeah. I mean, I really don't like reading, so
Okay.
if anything, that's kind of good. Actually,
Okay, indifferent. All right, so fine. Let's go to the lovers then. Let's see. It was Islam and Jasper, right? I think. I can't remember. I know Islam. Jasper, were you up there with the lovers?
No, I raised that 6, 6, 7.
Who else was up there? I can't remember. Okay, Islam, you're on your own. Go ahead. Tell us why you liked it so much.
I was not prepared for this, but I did like Rumi because, well, I have to look back at the text one more time, but he I can't elaborate right now, but I will be ready in a
None of you want to talk about Rumi. Okay, that's fine. Thank God I want to talk about him. Otherwise, we can just book the go home, or we are home. Sorry. Okay, so let's get in the text then. So let's review a little bit. I'm gonna again go over the contrast between Rumi and Maimonides, since that's what you're gonna need for your test. And also it's an interesting contrast, right? So first of all, we know that Rumi, we're going to find out actually that Rumi is in the opposite end of the spectrum, right? So we saw that for Maimonides, suffering is something that we cause, right? It's usually human error that brings about most of the suffering we undergo, right? Whether we don't know how to relate, we make a mistake, you know, and suffering ensues, right? So most of our suffering is really human made, right? And so God is not involved, right, in our suffering. And so, but according to Maimonides, we can rise above our suffering through the proper use of our reason being a vessel for divine providence, that is to say, divine light, divine wisdom, and so forth, right? So that's Maimonides. Now, Rumi is going to be on the opposite end. We're going to see that for him, instead of the mind, we have the heart, right? Which is the place where we can connect to God, right? It's a different organ, right? We're switching. And we're going to talk about this today, right? The knowledge of the heart, which is kind of new concept, right? For us Westerners. And of course, he's going to go then and mention, we're going to also talk about a much needed purification of the heart, right? If the heart is to truly experience God, kind of like the mind in Maimonides, remember? Right? It was not enough to have reason. Reason had to be broad enough. Reason had to be uncluttered. Reason had to go through steps of purification before it could really hold divine providence, right? So it's very similar for the heart, right? Even though the heart is the point of contact between God and us, the heart also needs to be purified. And one of the ways that the heart is purified, we'll see in Rumi, is through suffering, right? So we're going to see suffering very different than Maimonides, and I'm hoping you guys are writing all this down. This is very important, right? We're going to see suffering as actually a gift from God to purify the heart so that the heart can better connect or reflect the divine light, right? Okay, so that's kind of like the trajectory where we're headed. Islam, you have a question?
Negative. Negative.
All right. Good. So today we're going to talk about the knowledge of the heart, right? So, which is the title of the poem that we're about to do. Right, page 11, I'm going to focus on the poem Mystics Know, right? So we're going to talk about here a different kind of knowledge than what we're used to, right? We're usually used to scientific knowledge, right? You go out in the world, you explore, and you kind of use your mind to figure out what is going on. So usually knowledge is something out there that we can all agree on, right? Here, this is something different. This is a mystical knowledge. This is an inner knowledge that no one else sees, right? In other words, we have here a very new understanding of knowledge, right? Usually we say something has the dignity of knowledge if everyone agrees that it's true. Here we're talking about something very subjective, very personal, very intimate. It's a knowledge of the heart. Only you can feel this knowledge, right? And notice I mentioned the word feel, right? It's not you know in the sense of it's you know through a feeling. So we're going to talk about this, right? So this is very different. We're talking about two different dimensions, right? Scientific knowledge and mystical knowledge, right? So let's talk a little bit, briefly distinguish them, right? Between scientific knowledge and mystical knowledge. We're used to scientific knowledge, right? Which is, so let me add what I mean by that. Scientific knowledge is usually something that everyone agrees on, right? It's out there. It's objective, right? It's a knowledge of objects. That's usually the case with scientific knowledge, right? With knowledge of the heart, so mystical knowledge, right, is something that only you know, right? It's intimate, personal, and it's subjective, right? So it's interesting that there can be something like subjective knowledge. It's not an opinion. It's not a belief, according to Rumi. It's a knowledge. So this is very new. The idea that the heart can know is something that we as Westerners have never really explored, right? We tend to think only the mind can know, and the heart is all murky and messed up and full of weird emotions. Right? No. According to Rumi, the heart can also know. So today we will explore what does it mean to know with the heart, right? That's what we're going to be talking about. And of course, it will be very different type of knowledge than scientific knowledge, right? Scientific knowledge is intellectual. The knowledge of the heart, make sure you write this down, is experiential. You experience it versus you understand it rationally, right? So we're going to look at that. Okay, to really understand what he's talking about, because most of us are not mystics, right? So if you're a mystic, you get it right away what I'm saying, right? If you come from some religious tradition and you've experienced this, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But if you're not a mystic, we need to go a little bit more into detail. What does this mean to know with the heart? And can this knowledge be reliable? So for this, I'm going to take a little detour through Platonic philosophy. We're going to look at Plato, because actually Plato talks about this. So this tells us actually that this kind of knowledge that Rumi is talking about has been spoken about by philosophers. It's already discovered. It's not some mystical illumination he had. It's not some religious thing. This type of knowledge has already been explored, developed, how shall I put it? Validated, right? This is not new. Philosophers have been talking about this way of knowing for centuries, since Plato on to today. When we do actually Gabriel Marcel, later in the class, we will talk even more about this type of knowledge, right? So throughout philosophy, philosophers have recognized that the heart can know, right? But we don't do philosophy in the Western world, right? So we just know the scientific, right? So let's go to Plato, and let's see if let's look at how many of you have studied The Republic by Plato? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, a couple of you, so you will help me out. Okay, so Plato actually talks about 4 kinds of knowledge. So we're going to talk about them right now. And he actually said he kind of draws a line, right? A vertical line, and then he has these gradations, right? So anybody know what are the 4 levels of knowing according to Plato? You can raise your hand if you know. If you don't, I will tell you. I'm just curious if anybody knows this. No? Okay. All right. 4 types of knowledge. I'm going to start from the lowest type of knowledge to the highest type of knowledge. And then we'll go into what each of these mean. Lowest type is opinion, then belief, then knowledge, then intuition. Okay, these are the in order of low to high, right? Opinion is the lowest, very primitive way of knowing. Belief is a little better. Knowledge is good, right? And then intuition is the highest form of knowledge, right? Actually, sorry, I put knowledge, but it shouldn't be knowledge. It should be like something like discursive knowledge or intuitive knowledge. Let me rewrite it. Opinion, belief. I don't like the word discursive because no one knows what that means. I'm going to say intellectual, no, because intuitive is also intellectual. Well, let's just put it like that. Intellectual knowledge. I'm changing a little bit the words of Plato, okay? So you can get the meaning. Okay, so opinion, belief, intellectual knowledge, and then intuition, all right? Okay, so let's take an example, okay? Let's imagine that we are all in Plato's cave. Did I tell you the story of Plato's cave? I don't think so, right? How many of you? Okay, I'll tell it to you next time. But for now, let's imagine we're in a cave and we've lived there forever. And we've never been outside, and that's our life, okay? Are we all there? Put your hand on the screen if you're ready to be in the cave with me. Okay, very good. Okay, so in this cave, of course, we get stuff from the outside, right? We get food, we get, greens, vegetables, fruits. We get all kinds of things from the outside to nourish us, but we've never been outside. And so we are now in the cave discussing whether the sun actually exists, okay? So we've never seen it, right, of course, and we're all kind of debating together because we have nothing else to do. Does the sun really exist? And, and we're wondering if we can actually get to this knowledge of whether the sun exists, okay? So there's 4 of us discussing, let's imagine, or 4 groups of people. First person pipes up and expresses an opinion. What would that sound like? So it's a very low form of knowledge. Tell me, if you were to express an opinion about the existence of the sun, how would it sound? Islam, go ahead.
I think the sun is yellow.
Okay, very good, right? I just have the feeling, right, that the sun exists and the sun, not the sun is yellow, but whether it exists, right? So yeah, I feel it's gotta exist, right? I think it's probably existing, right? So you have no proof, right? You're just saying something that you feel is right, right? By the way, most people are on that level, right? If you look at the political discourse today, you will hear so many people say, well, that's what I think. And then they think that there's some kind of dignity to that, right? That's what I think. Yeah, well, you're very low, right? With that's what I think. It's not enough to think, right? That something is X, Y, and Z because you don't have any proof, you don't have any evidence, you just what you think, it's nothing, right? So very low level opinion, right? Make sure you write this down. I think. I have no proof, nothing. It's just I feel it like that. That's what I think. Okay, now a little higher, belief. What would it sound like? That a belief about the sun's existence. How would it sound different from an opinion? How would it be a little better? Let's see if some of you can figure this out. Yes, Barrera, but go ahead, but how would it be different from I think the sun? And it's not about the warmth or the color, right? The existence of the sun. Okay, Jaramillo, you're on the right track. Um, except remember, we're in the cave, so we don't see light. Sing, go ahead.
Okay, so actually, my barber, he was telling me about this yesterday. So if you like, say like you imagine a black cat. I mean, sorry. Wait, let me track back. So, uh, wait. So basically, the sun, it doesn't exist because you haven't perceived it. So it's like the sun doesn't exist. Like that's like the most valid opinion you could give.
Yes,
That's what I'm trying
here
to
we're
say.
trying to we're trying to prove the opposite. So how would it? And we can, by the way, even if we're in the cave, right? I see where you're going. Well, I'll come back to what you're saying because it's relevant, actually, right? But here we are, right? Trying to talk about the existence of the sun. What would it sound like? Better than an opinion. What would it sound like to say a belief about the sun? Jaramillo, let's see if you can get it.
It'd probably be like it's up there, like it's above us.
How do you like, how is that not an opinion?
It's more like a belief, damn, like believing in God type of thing.
And what makes a
Okay.
belief stronger than an opinion? That's my question. What makes a belief a little better than an opinion?
There's a purpose,
An opinion too.
a hope. There's
Have a purpose.
hope,
Uh,
hope,
huh?
hope.
But that's kind of like an opinion, right? Wishful thinking. So you say, I think. But we've progressed, right? What makes a belief stronger than an opinion? Let's see. Sing, you want to try again? Oh no, that's the hand from before. Okay. Islam, go ahead. Oh, and then Rosario. Yeah.
Uh, can we like the way someone says it? Can we use that as an example?
Uh,
Like, or like, cause what I said in the comments, I was like, the way they see it. So like, if I say the sun exist, like you. All right, this is really hard. I'm sorry. Is this
I know, I know. Rosario, help us, save us.
Um,
Barrera, you're on the right track. Okay, Rosario, go ahead.
I was just gonna say if multiple people believe in it.
Yes. Okay, now you have a little bit of evidence, right? Many people have heard from many people, reliable sources, right, that the sun exists. So now you have some evidence, right? But it's not yet, it's still a combination of possible opinions, right? But it's a little better. You have evidence, but it's not yet, certain evidence, right? Because all these people could be wrong. Pictures. Al-Mulaki is asking if we have pictures of the sun.
in the case?
Yeah, maybe that would work for belief. Um, so you have some evidence, but it's not yet sure, right? Somebody could have came up with these pictures or designed them themselves, right? Could have, how you mess with reality, right? So we're not quite, so it's belief is knowledge that is not yet sure, but there's some reliable evidence, okay? So we're getting better. Now, uh, intellectual knowledge that the sun exists, okay? So more scientific knowledge, I guess. I said intellectual knowledge, but I think it's easier to say scientific knowledge. What would be a scientific take on the situation? You're now, right? We've heard two people in the cave, right? Somebody who has a belief, somebody who has an opinion. Now, if somebody was a little more scientifically minded, how would they put it? Let's see. And remember, you can't leave the cave nothing, right? Jaramillo, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. So what was the belief?
Okay, yeah, let me write it in
Yeah,
the chat.
I didn't get to.
So, opinion is totally unfounded, right? Belief is you have some evidence, but you're not sure if it's reliable, right? Now, Islam, you're on the right track. Go ahead, Islam, speak to us about the scientific knowledge of the sun.
Well, if we're gonna go about things like the scientific way, you're talking about different type of knowledge. One type of knowledge is like really, really scientific, and you can see it. And I was also trying to say that we base our knowledge or what we know based on what we see, smell, taste, hear, things that we can measure. So I was just trying to say, like, if we use the scientific method to get a result or a conclusion, then we would have to first, like, I don't know the scientific method in order, but because I forgot, but we'd have to use our senses or make a hypothesis first, and then start to make more sense with evidence that we can actually measure. And then, well, before that, we'd make observation, and then we would do the testing, and then, right?
Now
I mean,
remember, you can't leave the cave.
can't leave it.
Can't leave the cave. How do you do it?
All right, I'm not sure if the scientific method exists yet.
But you can do it without testing. You guys are talking about, testing data. You can totally do this scientifically without even stepping out of the cave. It's possible. Let's see if we have some scientists here. Al-Haddai, go ahead.
Maybe you can say that they're warm, therefore the sun exists.
Say that again, sorry, couldn't hear.
Maybe you say that you feel warm, therefore the sun exists.
But it could be another source. It could be, geothermal, right?
No, because you're in the cave, and if there's no sun, the cave will be really cold.
It could be a
But since it's
volcano.
not,
What if it's a volcano underneath the cave? It exists, right? The earth can itself. Let's see. But you're on the right track, though. Al-Haddai, that's the direction. That's the direction. Let's see if we can find an even better scientific argument for the sun. That's the direction. Humidity, Barrera. What do you mean? Barrera, do you want to elaborate on what you put in?
I just mean that in places that like are sunnier, there's a lot of humidity. Like Florida, I know has a lot of humidity. So I don't know if maybe like the cave has like water in it, and then the heat from the sun makes it hot. So it's humidity.
That's the direction, right? You start from the laws of nature and you deduce from the laws of nature, because there is this phenomenon, therefore there must be a source of heat, therefore, right? And this source of heat has to be, right, above us, right? And so forth, right? So now you see how you're making deductions, right? You're saying, here's a law of nature, and based on this law, we can explain this phenomenon, right? And therefore from this law we can deduce, right? Without ever leaving the cave. You can sit there in the cave and deduce from the law. Another way that I do it is, you receive greens, vegetables, and so forth, and you have to admit that, in order for them to grow, they need sun, and the fact that you're seeing them means that, right, it's all the deduction, right? So you're simply, so let me write this down, right? So this scientific knowledge, you can stay in the cave and make deductions, right? Based on the laws of nature. Stay in the cave and make deductions or inferences, right? Based on the laws of nature. Okay, now, what's intuition? What kind of knowledge would it be to think of the sun on the level of intuition, or to know the sun, that the sun exists on the level of intuition? Some of you already mentioned it without knowing. What would be the highest form of evidence or of knowledge of the sun? Some of you already said it. Yes, who was that? Let me check the chat here. Somebody said it. It went very fast. Yes, you're all saying it. Yes, Ahmad, exactly. Ahmad, do you want to speak up?
I'm kind of confused by my own answer, because you said we can't leave the cave. So
Yes, for
how
this
can
one
we
you can.
how would I,
yeah.
how would I see the sun if I can't leave the
No,
cave?
you can. The first 3 levels of knowledge, you don't have to leave the cave to do. That's what I meant. I know, I made it confusing. But the last one is basically the experiential knowledge of having been in the sun at some point of your life. So you know it experientially. You've been in the presence of the sun. And even though you're in the cave now, you can tell people about that experience. Does that make sense? So even though you can't go back out, you can still say, having experienced it earlier in your life, you can say, I have seen the sun, I have been in the presence of the sun. I don't need any more proof. I know, even if it's by myself, right? Nobody agrees with you. Right? Do you notice how you can be all alone and still be right? Right? Everybody in the cave is like, nah, there's no sun. And you're like, I was there. I was in the presence of it. Okay? Everybody, so let me write this last one down. So intuition, right? Intuition is having experienced, been in the presence of, right? And so even if someone in the cave, this is important, make sure you get this. Even if someone in the cave can prove to you mathematically that the sun doesn't exist, if you've experienced the sun, you're like, yo, I understand your argument, I see your reasoning, but I experienced it, right? So that intuition kind of overrides any other knowledge, right? All three lower knowledges can be, you can override them with your experience. So for example, somebody says, I just don't think there's a sun. I don't believe it. You can be like, I was in the presence of the sun. There's nothing you can say to change my mind, right? Or someone says, well, many people say the sun doesn't exist, so it can't exist. You're like, I was right there. Even though you're all alone, everybody in the cave is like, nah, it doesn't exist, right? And then someone says, mathematically proves to you there can be no sun. Great proof, scientifically, based on the laws of nature, and you can still say, I'm sorry, I know all of you are saying this, but because I was in the presence of the sun, nothing can sway me. Make sure you write this down. I'm going somewhere with this, right? Because I was in the presence of the sun, nothing that you say is going to change my mind. Okay? Everybody clear on these 4 forms of knowledge? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, now let's go to Rumi, because that's exactly what he's doing in Mystics Know. He's distinguishing between the intellectual knowledge of God and the experiential knowledge of God. And what he's saying here, and we'll get to the text in a second, is that if you've had experiential knowledge of God, then you don't need proofs. And no proof against God will stand because you have this deeper knowledge, right? Let me give you an example. Maybe it's not a good example, but how many of you have been ever in a relationship where everybody told you they were a jerk except you? You thought they were good. Anybody been? Okay. So you had this kind of deep experiential knowledge of that person, so that whatever people were saying, you were like, I know them. This is not true. You just see them from the outside. You're still, you're not where I am, right? I have access to them that you don't have, right? So I know them on a deeper level, and I just know that whatever you're saying, right, that person is like this and not like what you're saying, right? So this is the idea, right? So what he's saying is that once you have this experiential knowledge of God, whether there is proof or not, right, doesn't sway you anymore. And the thing is, if you don't have this experiential knowledge, then you will be caught up. I'm not sure. Is there not? And there's lots of arguments against, lots of arguments for, and now you're sitting here and you can't make a decision, right? Ultimately, Rumi says your mind cannot get there, right? We know this already, right? For Rumi, if you want to know if God exists, if there's really a God, your mind will not take you to an answer. Your mind will always be swayed between, there's so many arguments for, and then there's so many arguments against, and I just can't make up my mind, and you stuck. That's why Rumi says, ultimately, you have to switch to the heart and actually experience. Now, what does it mean to experience God? Anyone want to illuminate the class on this? What does it mean to actually experience God? Has anybody experienced God and lived to tell about it? What is Rumi talking about? Is there a way to experience God, right? God is, he's not flesh and blood, right? We can't see him, we can't touch him. So how might we experience God in this way and reach this higher knowledge? Anybody know? Anybody want to enlighten us? Any mystics among us who have experienced or tasted God, like the prophets say in the Hebrew Bible? What does it mean to experience God? Has anyone ever had this experience? Really, I'm in a class of a whole classroom. No knowledge of God, 0. It's good you're taking this class. Islam, try.
All right. Do you want to know an experience that basically was like, all right, this is it for me? Or do you want to know for, I guess, the signs I use or the signs I acknowledge for the existence of the Creator?
So it's different than signs, because when you have signs, you're still reasoning. This happened, therefore this, right? God helped me here, God helped me there, there was this event of synchronicity, therefore outside evidence, right? Signs are outside evidence. I'm talking about an experience, direct experience of God, not mediated by science. It goes deeper than science. Ahmad, help us.
Um, perhaps like Job's mystical experience with in the Voice of the Whirlwind, where
Explain to us.
um, like explaining it defeats the experience itself because you can't explain it.
Right.
It's
But
beyond words, because even if you use words, you're the experience is so high that words themselves are signs, so
yes.
you can't explain it at all.
You're throwing my own rhetoric back at me, I see. Okay, very good. Yes, Ahmad. But Job says something interesting. He says, my ears had heard of you, belief, opinion. And now my eyes have seen you, which is a deeper knowledge, right? And which we're talking about. And you're right. It is Job felt God in his own flesh and blood, right? This wasn't a thing of the mind anymore. He didn't know about God. He was hit by God, like being hit by a bus, right? So he felt God in his flesh, right? In the suffering and the experience, right, of suffering. But here Rumi is talking about something else, another type of experience, very close to what you're saying, right? Job is experiencing something powerful within his flesh and blood, but this is a different type of experience, where you are actually not knowing, but you are experiencing directly God. Islam, you want to try again? Go ahead.
Yes. But the thing is, like, if you're asking us to basically describe our experience of God, just like, not just like, but as much as we can to Job, it's really hard. But the closest I would get, honestly, is the fact that I exist. I would not say that God is within me unless I had like literal proofs. But I would say that my existence is my experience that God exists. Because the finite points to the infinite, but that's just me. So
okay, so let's ask the class. Where is Islam on the Platonic line? Is he on belief, opinion, or scientific knowledge? When he says that my existence points to the existence of God, there are elements in my life. In other words, you have some proofs, right? I mean, there's several proofs for God. We know there's proof, that God exists through the coherence of the universe, right? I see that the earth is coherent, therefore there must be a creator, right? So these are some arguments. I would put you on the level of the knowledge, right? The scientific knowledge with proofs, right? Okay, great. Yes, I think the class agrees. Level 3. So this is different. This is not just a proof or reasoning, right? Islam, you're still reasoning, right? You're still looking at it intellectually. You're great Maimonidean, right? You would be a disciple of Maimonides. You would do very well under Maimonides. Al-Hadai, save us.
I don't know, but maybe like when you pray, feel like how sometimes before you pray you get really mad and you have all these feelings, and then you pray and then you feel good. Maybe that's what it is.
You're right there, right? Exactly. This is an experience of the presence of God. In other words, you start praying like Al-Hada is describing, and I'm sure a lot of us have had this experience. You start praying, you're all messed up, you're full of anger and resentment, and you're like, anxious or depressed. You start to pray, and little by little, right? This is one way. There are many ways to do this, but this is one way. You feel peace, right? Or you feel love in your heart, or you feel like something clarifies, right? You feel like the clouds go away, right? And instead you have this kind of sunshine, right? This light floods you. All of these different experiences of switching from darkness to light in your heart, right? From moving from anxiety to peace, from anger to love, right? From fear to hope, right? Anytime your heart shifts and finds itself flooded, right, with love or peace, or you are at that moment experiencing God directly in your heart. Am I making sense? Put your hand in the screen if you're following me, right? Now, not all of us have experienced this, right? In fact, I'm pretty sure only a few, right? This is not Most of us, we know God through what we heard from our religion. God is this, God is that, I have to do this, I have to do that, right? Or we have some signs, like Islam was saying, right? Some things happened in my life that gave me an intellectual sense that there must be a God, right? But this is much deeper. This is an actual experience of the palpable presence of God within your heart. Remember the beautiful quote, I think one of you is quoting it in the chat, right? Where is the throne of God, right? The throne of, or the jugular vein, right? This is Islam, right? This is talking about God within, right? So there is actually, this is a revolutionary idea. We have the possibility of experiencing God within us, right? The actual presence of God within us. And when we have gone through this experience, no proof can stand before us. Whatever you will demonstrate to me, it doesn't, I have experienced directly, right? So in other words, you can prove to me God doesn't exist. I can never forget this experience and this profound shift that occurred in my heart over and over again, each time I open myself up to it, right? So that's what we're talking about here, right? Everybody clear on the 4 levels, right? So if we were to apply the whole issue to God, opinion is, I think God exists. He must exist, right? Belief is, well, I believe God exists because we have 5,000 years of tradition and scriptures, and so many, my community believes in God, therefore I believe in God. Write this down, this is good. Scientific knowledge of God, well, there are certain proofs of God, right? For example, could the universe, right, which is so coherent, appear without some kind of intelligence? This tells me there must be some first cause, therefore there must be some God. This is intellectual. And the last level of experience of God is the actual presence. Did you get this? Okay, I'm writing it down. So when we apply it to God, right, this whole degrees of knowledge, so belief, no, sorry, opinion. So opinion, it would sound like this. I feel there's a God, right? Or I think there's a God. You don't know, you have no proof. You just, your opinion, right? Second level, a little better, right? I believe there is a God, right? Because my whole community believes it, right? And there's scripture. So it's reliable source, right? This is my whole tradition. These are my people. I trust them. They're good people. Therefore, there must be a God, right? Then you get to a little better than intellectual knowledge, right? Here you have proofs of God, intellectual proofs, right? For example, the argument from design, we call it, right? If there is a beautiful design, there must be a designer. That's a proof, intellectual proof, right? If there is a design, there must be a designer. Even the great philosopher Voltaire, atheist philosopher, right, from France, 18th century, said, I know God doesn't exist, but I can't, and I'm going to write it down, I can't conceive, right, of a clock without a clockmaker, right? So he's acknowledging that, right, the universe, it works like a clock, therefore there must be some intelligence, right? And finally, intuitive, right? This is, I have experienced or been, right, in the very presence of God, right? This is the highest form of level of knowledge of God. And that's what we have here spoken in our poem. So let's go now to our poem. And you'll see now more clearly what he's talking about. So mystics know, right? I'm going to read from the top. Since wisdom is the true believers, are you there, all of you? Put your hand in the screen. Okay. Since wisdom is a true believer's stray camel, he knows it with certainty from whomsoever he may have heard it. And when he finds himself, notice, face to face with it, how should there be any doubt? How can he mistake, right? So in other words, having been face to face with God or having experienced God directly, presence of God, you don't need any more proof. You know experientially in the heart, right? Continuing. He has several examples. The thirsty man, the baby, right? If you tell a thirsty man, here's a cup, drink. So now he's drinking. He's good. He has experiential knowledge that the drink is satisfying him. Will he reply, this is mere assertion, leave me alone, go away, right? If the man is drinking and he is experiencing being quenched, right? His thirst being quenched. Is he going to start to question whether the water quenches thirst? No, he's experiencing it. Are you following that? Put your hand. in the screen, right? In other words, if you're right now drinking and your thirst is being quenched, are you going to be like, I wonder if water quenches thirst? No. You're going to be, you don't have a question anymore. Same thing. The baby is feeding, right? Is what do you call it? Nursing, right? It's there. It's being completely, it's completely satisfied by the mother's milk. Is it one day going to think, does milk work? Right? Is it going to think, does milk really nourish me? No, it's experiencing it. Doesn't need to ask any questions. It's a deeper form of experience. That's what he's saying, right? Or suppose a mother cries to her babe, come, my mother, hark, my child. Will it say, prove this? Right? That prove to me that your milk works. The child already knows, right? That it works. And then we get now to the prophet, right? When in the heart of the people, let me go further. When the prophet utters a cry from without, the soul of the people falls from within. And here's the sentence, right? Because never, turn the page, because never in the world will the soul's ear have heard a cry of the same kind as this. And this is what they're talking about here. That wondrous voice is heard by the soul in exile, the voice of God calling, lo, I am nigh. Nigh means close. I'm near, right? So this experience of the nearness of God, of the actual presence, of the enveloping presence, right? Or of the love, or of the peace, whatever you want to call it, whatever you've experienced. That experience is this knowledge of the heart. And nothing can trump it, right? It is the highest knowledge. All other knowledge have to bow before it, right? Or kind of, how did I put it? This knowledge overrides, right, all the other knowledges. Are we all clear on this? Is everyone understanding what I'm saying, including complete people who've never experienced this? Are you following what I'm, at least theoretically? Right, right. So I'm sure a few of you have experienced this already, right? Anybody want to have the courage to share one experience so that the class can see what is being talked about? So like, tell us like something that happened where you felt that presence and it meant something, so that we can see what concretely. Anybody want to have the courage to share? I know it's a little personal. Probably no one. Okay, that's all right. Good. Islam, was that a hand? Unmute yourself.
Yes, briefly. I mean, the closest I do feel, I don't know, when I look at my prayer mat and I put my head on the ground and I'm whispering, when my head is on the floor and I'm like bowing to the Creator, I feel very close to the Creator, and I feel so close that I feel as if, I don't know, that moment is very, it's a very precious moment, but it it's like, I don't know, I don't know, but I think of my grave one day and the shape, how it's gonna be, and I think about my stay there, and I try to ask for mercy from the God. So
Good.
I don't know, it's I know it's all personal experience from everybody, and it's special for everybody, so. But that's like the closest I could get to.
Very good. Right, so you're having actually experience, right? It's a feeling, right? This is the difference. It's not a thought, right? It's a feeling. You're sensing something within yourself that no one else can see. This is why it's unusual to call it a knowledge, right? Because it's very subjective, very personal. And yet you know experientially in your flesh you're feeling this actual presence, right? Excellent. And I think Al-Hadayi said something similar, right? When she talks about praying and moving, shifting the emotions, right? From angry or resentful or anxious, and slowly throughout the prayer, there is a different quality, right? The quality of her emotions change. Very good.
Yes. After prayer, I feel completely different, meaning like if I was angry, like, I don't know, I think it's probably what keeps my family, like, we're good. Like, we wouldn't, the family would probably go crazy if we didn't have that. I don't know, it's like a fresh, cold wash of the brain. And I just like, I don't know if I was angry or if I was like really, you know how people's behavior gets a little disgusting, or our behavior starts to sometimes become a little sharp as a blade. So I think prayer makes my heart soft, but that's just my experience with God. So
Very good, right? So a shift occurs. You're shifting from hate to love, from anxiety to peace, right? Um, so that's what that is, and this kind of, as Cora is saying, you get refreshed. Something is actually happening, right? It's not your imagination, right? This is actually, it's very hard to shift your feelings by yourself, right? They always come back, right? So this is really something is taking place, right, within yourself, which could be described as the actual presence of God taking over, right, and pushing away the darkness, right? The light is entering and pushing away the darkness, and this is what the presence of God feels like, right? I see a couple more hands. Ahmad, go ahead.
I don't know if this is exactly what you're trying to get at, but this is a simple example, but for me, it's very profound. Whenever I eat, every time when I'm fully present with my food, and after finishing, we Muslims usually pray before and after eating every meal. So I've noticed that every time I don't pray before and after eating, I just constantly keep eating. But if I do, there's a part of my soul that just feels like it hasn't been nourished. So when I do pray before and after eating, I feel perfectly fine and I don't feel like I need to eat anymore.
Okay, very good. Good weight loss advice, right? Feed the soul so that you don't emotionally eat and eat and eat. So you're talking about, right, actual nourishment of the soul. The soul, in a way, is filled by what, right? Rumi would argue something has entered your soul. Something is now nourishing your soul, and this is another version, right, or variation on the presence of God, right? And that's why you don't need to emotionally eat and eat and eat, right? Very good. Okay, so now, of course, this is not easy, and if and a lot of us, we come to pray, and there's no shift, right? I mean, this is a handful of us who've experienced these shifts. Most of us, to be honest, our hearts just remain cluttered, right? It's very hard for most of us to get rid of the resentment in order to make room, or to have this experience, right? If we look at our hearts right now, all of us objectively, right, there is so much clutter, so much anxiety, so much fear, so much pain, so much resentment, so much anger, right? There's a lot of clutter, which means that in a way we never really are able to experience something else, right? In other words, this presence that Rumi is talking about necessitates a kind of heart, right? Not everyone can experience this level of presence. And the reason is that our hearts are too cluttered. Just like the brain. Remember from Maimonides, the mind is too narrow or the mind is too cluttered, then the divine providence cannot flow in. It's the same. The reason a lot of us are not experiencing this presence, are not feeling this peace or this love or this joy, is because our hearts are full of clutter, negative, toxic emotions, right? And so what to do? Well, Rumi has a solution, right? We have to undergo purification of the heart in order to get rid of these toxins. And so next time when we meet, we're going to talk about the role of suffering, but not only that, the role of forgiveness, right? We're going to talk about how to suffer gracefully. And I'm going to lead you into a teaching on forgiveness. We talk about forgiveness, but we don't know what it is, right? I'm going to lead you in a teaching on forgiveness, which has to do about how we suffer. What is the way to suffer gracefully in order that your heart might be purified rather than cluttered even more, right? Because a lot of times we suffer and it adds to the clutter. Yeah, he did this, she did this, I hate everybody, right? What we need to learn to do is suffer in a way that we are being purified by the suffering and not poisoned by it. This takes some skill. There is a technique of how to suffer gracefully, and this is what we'll be talking about next time. We'll be talking about not only suffering as a gift from God, we'll see that, but how to suffer gracefully so that that suffering purifies us rather than damages us, right? We'll be talking about that. Islam, last thoughts? No? Okay.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent. All right, guys. We'll end there. So, yeah. So next time you have just a reading assignment I guess it's from Wednesday. Reading assignment on the next part, and then we'll be done with Rumi. and Maimonides, and that's when your exam is due, right? Like, wait, what? What did I say? March 15th?
The
Yes.
exam is due March 20.
Because, yeah, exactly. Because I'm giving you a week to study, right? So, yes. So we'll finish the whole material for the test Wednesday, and then you can begin preparing. And you can finish off or redo your tests from before. Okay, guys, I'll stop the recording.